100 men will test today, but only 3 will win the Green Beret. Less than 1% of America's Army wears the Green Beret. Developing America's Green Berets takes a vision for the future, knowledge of the past, and an understanding of the present.
That's why psychological operations, civil affairs, special forces, and other special operations formations are so critical.
The John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School is home to both training Green Berets and developing the policy and doctrine our special forces operate by. SWCS, as it's more commonly known by, is where America's wars are won. Every Green Beret, past, present, and future, passes through these halls and woods. To share the mission of SWCS, I sat down with their commanding general, Brigadier General Beaurpere, and Command Sergeant Major Lionel Strong from the Special Warfare Museum at Fort Liberty, North Carolina.
What is the 1 or 2% we can do to improve to ultimately make this better, myself better, the team better?
General Beaurpere and Sergeant Major Strong explained why SWCS 2030 will develop a more prepared Special Forces Regiment through the establishment of 3 branch schools. 1 for Green Berets, 1 for Civil Affairs, and 1 for PSYOPs, each under their own 06 level command. In 2022, the Army tasked SWCS with the development of the Irregular Warfare Center of Excellence, a term used by many, but truly understood by few. So we break down irregular warfare, why it's important, and how it's complemented by psychological operations, another school being developed through SWCS 2030. Finally, we talk recruiting. Word on the street is that recruiting's down. The global war on terror generation of soldiers is retiring, and SOF was directed to cut personnel. So I challenged the CG and Sergeant Major to share how they're meeting the personnel needs of the regiment while enforcing the standard and continuously improving professionalism while integrating technology and automation into the force. Take a listen, watch, or read our conversation about the past, present, and future of SWCS. Then head over to our YouTube channel to watch General Beaurpere and Sergeant Major Strong share the importance of the Jedburghs in the Jedburgh Media Channel's first documentary, Unknown Heroes, Behind Enemy Lines at D-Day, the story of Operation Jedburgh.
General Beaurpere, Sergeant Major Strong, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast. Thanks for having me back here. So this is the second time in the museum, and I mean, the museum, I swear it gets better every time I come in here. So it's constantly evolving. And Roxanne, even yesterday at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we had to pull her out of one of the displays to tell her that we were leaving. But this place is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. No, welcome back, Fran. It's great that you get to do this back here where it all started for you in your own career.
True.
In Special Forces. And, you know, I think the one thing I'll tell you about this museum is every student now gets an opportunity to walk through here because we put so much emphasis on our heritage and the lineage that drew people to this profession, but also making sure that the next generation never forgets what came before them. So welcome back.
The mission here at the Special Warfare Center and School is twofold. First, you've got to recruit, assess, train the next generation of the special operator. But you also have to establish and field the doctrine that guides our operations. Both of those extremely complex and critical to our national security strategy. There's about, and I won't give the exact number because I won't get it right, but there's about 7,000 Green Berets in the Army. But there's 450,000 soldiers. So I did the math. I became a journalist, so I didn't have to study math, but this one wasn't that bad. It's like 1.5%. All right, I think that when you include the National Guard component. I would argue the top 1.5%, but I know there's some good soldiers out there who are just waiting to come over to SF. They haven't seen the light yet. But you're also responsible for the civil affairs and the psychological operations, and their mission not only here within Special Forces, but within the broader Army as well. The mission as defined of the U.S. Army John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School is to deliver world-class Special Forces civil affairs and psychological operations soldiers and doctrines for the full range of military operations across all domains and dimensions. It's a mouthful. What's the difference between serving as the proponent to deliver Army Special Operations soldiers versus developing and fielding that doctrine that drives their operations?
So, Fran, good question there. I think you're asking fundamentally about, you know, what is the difference between the center and the school at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School. So I'll talk a little bit about the functions of the center and the way we see the role as an Army proponent for 3 branches and a specified proponent for irregular warfare. And then maybe Sergeant Major can talk a little about the importance of the school and the training. And you're, as a center of excellence within the Army, we have a range of responsibilities for not only just doctrine and training, but also modernizing those branches. And that's where those proponent roles become really important. So we represent 3 branches that are assessed and selected into Special Forces, Civil Affairs, and Psychological Operations. We have to write the doctrine for those branches. We have to write the capstone doctrine that brings Army Special Operations together. And that's a constant state of revision. The Army updates its doctrine. The Joint Force updates its doctrine. We have to make sure that our doctrine aligns, stays relevant. We watch and draw operations or lessons from operations in Ukraine, in places like Gaza. We watch the battlefield of the modern era, and we draw that into our doctrine as well. That doctrine then drives training development for programs of instruction. And that's an absolutely critical function. We also have responsibility as a proponent for personnel, so managing the health of the force. Everything from accession and recruiting through training to the life cycle of a soldier out into the operational force, and managing that life cycle and that what ultimately really is an end strength number, and making sure that we maintain our end strength. So that's kind of the proponent role. I'll turn it over to Sergeant Major to talk a little bit about the training aspect.
Yes, it's kind of named the Special Warfare Center and School, and I think for both myself and General Beaurpere, I think neither of us had served at SWCS prior to taking this assignment. Particularly for me, I think I was pretty aware of what the Special Warfare Center, the school portion, did. I was not aware of the center and the proponent function, right? So the school is pretty easy. If you're in 1st Special Warfare Training Group, you're assessing, selecting, and force generating an RSOF MOS 183738, and that's pretty easy to understand. As a SFNCO, you're gonna train, lead, and develop RSOF soldiers to send onward to the operational force and serve, or you're teaching an advanced skill, i.e. Halo, Scuba, SIPARTIC, SIPSIC, ASOT. It's very much a train, lead, develop kind of model, and we have the most professional cadre to do that. And then there's another layer that's what they're doing, but kind of the first part of their job is managing risk, because we just do a lot of high-risk training here, and quite frankly, our students are some of that risk, because you have very driven people that are never going to quit, right? So, and the environments we produce is very risky, and our cadre are constantly like one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on the throttle, getting ready to monitor that environment. So that's the school, but I definitely didn't understand or fully appreciate the proponent functions or the center functions until I got here. And then I realized that proponent function, monitoring the health of all 3 branches at Great Plate, as well as professionally developing those MOSs and branches for career progression, and then as well as the production of that doctrine. So it's this relationship with us as the institution to the operational force to be constantly communicating, but the health of their formations to kind of fill those current operational requirements, but also, hey, what is the doctrine and training, and we need to modernize as the mission grows in the next 3 to 5 years moving forward. So, and if we don't get that doctrine or that proponent function right, we're going to continue to train and do the things we're doing now, and are we really preparing them for the future?
There's a special sauce there, right, in terms of what Sergeant Major is talking about, and that's the people in the school, right? Our cadre, our staff, the ones that are there with the students every single day, that role model, what a special operator looks like, that brings both their education and training with their operational experience coming together now and driving the next generation. And I'll tell you, that's been one of the greatest and most humbling aspects of this job, is seeing those special operators as cadres truly committed and devoted to developing that next generation. And they do it better than anybody else. It's phenomenal.
I think the cadre is where you really truly achieve mastery. Right? I think we train baseline RSOF soldiers, and then I would say they're like apprentice level. They go to the operational force, a couple years on a team. They're kind of in that journeyman kind of level. And I think when they come here and they're actually teaching those skills, they master it. So, for example, if you leave Range 37 or Yuma, you go back, you are now an asset to your whole group in that specific function. You should get leveraged across the entire group at that function.
I think you see that. I think you see that when they come back from SWCS, and they come back onto the teams, that they do have this level of knowledge and expertise that becomes critically useful.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I remember seeing that as guys came back. You talked a bit about modernization. Where are we going? By and large, the regiment has been organized similar for, I don't know, 70, 80 years, almost since the Jedburghs, right? There's been small modifications here and there, but the basic construct has been similar. The Army, USAJFK, 1st Special Forces Command have all really started this deep conversation about what is the next fight, especially as we come out of 20 plus years of really CT-focused operations, not a mission set of Special Forces, not our core number one mission. And now we look at a peer-to-peer fight. And what's that going to look like, and where do we fit in? You've put forward and drafted the SWC 2030 as the guiding vision for where you want the organization to go. And I'll read here, and then I'll turn it over to you. But it says, our institution must transform to address the modern multi-domain and multi-dimensional battlefield, and we must do so with urgency, knowing that Army Special Operations formations are already asked to take a leading role in solving the challenges instigated by peer and near-peer competitors worldwide. Unquote. I would argue those challenges are vast and they get more complex every day. You only have to turn on the news, but only turn it on for the first 15 minutes because crap after that.
And depressing.
And depressing, yeah. But can you talk about SWC 2030 and how that vision will better prepare our people to win on tomorrow's battlefield?
Yeah, so we say SWC 2030, really this is our strategy to transform and modernize, right? That's really what SWC 2030 is. Special Warfare Center and School, visualizing what we look like 5 to 7 years down the road, 2030. And it's a journey. It really is a journey, right? And I think it starts with where the Army is right now. And the Army is very much in an era of continuous transformation. We don't know when the next conflict is going to occur. We were strategically surprised on September 11th. We don't want to be strategically surprised again, but we'll probably get it wrong. So we got to be ready. And we're going to be ready with the Army we have today. If that day comes tomorrow, right? We're going to fight with what we have today. Or if it comes 2 years from now or 5 years from now, we don't know. So we have to maintain readiness, but transform at the same time to meet those demands of the 21st century battlefield. When we talk about 2030 and visualizing what the institution will look like, a couple things come to mind institutionally. I think first and foremost, we have to do a better job with the branches that we have here of aligning with the reserve component. A large portion of the civil affairs and the psychological operations capabilities in the Army actually reside in the reserves. And so how do the reserves train their psychological operations and civil affairs soldiers? How do we train our soft civil affairs and psychological operations soldiers? I think first and foremost, you have to achieve a baseline capability of critical tasks at the initial entry level so we're all speaking the same language and we can be interoperable across components. So a large part of what 2030 envisions is better alignment with the reserves to include a stationing action for the 6th Task Brigade, Total Army School System Brigade, which is the reserve brigade that trains PSYOP and civil affairs soldiers. They need to be on our campus here. They need to be integrated with our civil affairs and psychological operations school. The second piece is the Commandants. So the Commandants traditionally in Army doctrine and Army regulations are the branch chiefs that drive modernization for their branches. They represent their branches at the Army table, at the joint table. They help drive modernization, and they look down and in and make sure that the POIs, the programs of instruction for their branch, remains relevant at all times. We had a gap in our swing here. When we came into command, we did not have a civil affairs or psychological operations commandant. We want to reestablish those commandants by 2030. They need to be 06s. They need to be Farmer Brigade commanders. And they need to be the senior branch representatives for those branches. And then really giving those branches an opportunity to really develop their own schools. Right now, our civil affairs and our PSYOP training occur in 1st Training Group, led and commanded by a Green Beret, which is great. And there's good integration. But really, it is somewhat stymied by their ability to truly drive institutionally where the branch needs to go for the Army, let alone for USAJFK. So the first initiative is the Army and USAJFK articulated a force modernization priority for information advantage the ability to gain advantage over an adversary, influence that adversary to change its behavior. We realized there was not only a gap in a commandant, but a gap in a school system that really focused on information advantage. So we wanted to establish the PsyWar School to meet that USAJFK force modernization priority and the Army modernization priority. So we've actually task organized now into a PsyWar School. We've got an interim commandant that's in position, sourced by, to their credit, by the reserves temporarily until we can get a full-time commandant in place. And what that has done is it has brought the proponent function and the school function together into a sphere. The other big thing about 2030 is irregular warfare. The Army is assigned specified proponency, so think doctrine, training, leader development responsibilities, to USAJFK, which delegated that down to the Special Warfare Center and school to establish a proponent office for irregular warfare to help sustain the education of irregular operations and activities in support of conventional warfare across the Army. I think, when you think about an RSOF soldier, we inherently think irregular. I think our approach is irregular. But the truth is, a large portion of what the Army has done over the course of its career, its history, has been irregular warfare. Think counterinsurgency, think the past 20 years of global war on terrorism. That's been a large part of what the Army does. Stability operations, reconstruction, civil military operations. Those are all kind of lumped into this thing called irregular warfare, but they're operations and activities that really remain very relevant. So we're going to stand up an irregular warfare academy to help drive that initiative to maintain doctrine, training, leader development, professional military education on irregular warfare, make it relevant to conventional warfare, and articulate it into programs of instruction, not only just in our school, but really across the Army, and build a community of interest beyond just USAJFK. And there's a wide community of interest on irregular warfare right now, which I think is pretty exciting. So that's a glimpse at some of the things we're looking at SWCS 2030.
I want to dig into both the irregular warfare piece and the psychological operations and the PsyWar School piece, because I think that those are critically important. You mentioned that there's a big contingent of, especially on the psychological civil affairs operations side, is in the reserves. But if you go back, and we've had a lot of conversations here today, you go back to World War II, you go back to, through history, psychological warfare has been a soft task. Mm-hmm. Why? And we had the OSS, right? Why is psychological warfare a soft task? And why has the Army said, hey, not only is this a soft task, but you're best positioned to scale, grow this, and then not only do it, as we've done a lot, we tend to sometimes be siloed, and we'll say, hey, we soft deals with soft, see everybody else, figure it out. But they've said not only that, but for both psychological operations and for irregular warfare, we, big Army, are going to send you people. You're going to train them and then kick them back to us.
Yeah. So 1952, when the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center School first stood up, it was a PsyWar Center, right? It was the only PsyWar center in the Army in 1952. We weren't even a branch yet. USAJFK didn't even exist yet. But the Army realized that there's something to this application of psychological operations, which we conducted through World War II and Korean War, and that had to be harnessed somewhere in one location, institutionally. So I think, the PsyWar School harkens back to that lineage and that history, that, yes, certainly there are roots to the OSS, but more importantly, psychological warfare is something we've conducted for the preponderance of our history as a military. In terms of communicating messages to an audience and changing their behavior, which is really what we're looking for in psychological warfare, changing behavior. And we do that through our school and train soldiers to do that in our school. But why is the Army keen to keep that in special operations? Again, I think it goes back to indirect approaches, irregular approaches, something that is maybe a little bit squishy, a little hard to understand. But we have the preponderance of the expertise here. And when you combine that with some of the other capabilities of the Army, like cyber or even space, the ability to convey those messages through different mediums, we can do the target audience analysis. We can understand how that target audience functions, how they think to change their behavior. But there's so many other ways to get that message to that audience that it really becomes a total Army approach, right? So that's kind of where the relationship with the Army becomes really important. The other piece as to why there's a psychological operations component in the reserves, I think it just goes to capacity.
Yeah.
And a lot of our psychological operations soldiers that serve in Army special operations who then want to get out of the Army, we want to keep serving, have an opportunity then to go into the reserves and continue to do what they're doing in the reserves. So, there is a symbiotic relationship there. Right?
Think about the long game too. I think when I was an infantry officer prior to coming over to SF, hey, you think about the conventional fight, we're really good. We've seen this historically over time. We're great when we, mass effects very quickly, very swiftly take decisive action as a conventional force. We can kick anybody's ass very, very fast. As things get drawn out, it starts to get more complex. It starts to get more difficult. When we think about things like irregular warfare, that balance begins to shift, right? And same for psychological operations. You're not going to start a messaging campaign and in a week, all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh yeah, America's great. We love Americans. Throw down your arms. It's going to take a long time. Yeah. And when I think about soft capability, and we really often equate it to the soccer field, little league soccer versus major league soccer. Little league, they're all chasing the ball across the field. Somebody kicks it to the other side. There's nobody there. And where soft really maps that battle space, they stay patient. They wait out the long game. And by having these capabilities and developing them within soft, how do we get the conventional Army to understand that, hey, patience sometimes and looking at the big picture all the time is how we have to play the long game, especially against an enemy like China, who has a 100-year plan.
Well, so the first thing I'll tell you is deterrence, right? I think you have to layer in our access and our placement around the world every single day, our ability to see, sense, and understand the operational environment, and then conduct operations and activities forward before conflict to deter the enemy. And should we go to conflict, then prepare the environment for conflict. That's what SOF does. That's why psychological operations, civil affairs, special forces, and other special operations formations are so critical. Left of conflict. We often overlook that with the Army. Yeah. And I think that's where the dialogue with the Army becomes a little bit challenging sometimes, because so much of what we can provide is in that deterrent phase. It is in that shaping phase, in that competition, in that campaigning. But you walk into a warfighter or you walk into a combat training center with the Army, and all of a sudden you're in large-scale ground combat, right? And everything that occurred before is either white-carded or it's just kind of assumed away. And we find ourselves in a very kinetic, high-tempo, close combat fight, which we have a role in as well. Maybe not in the very close, but probably in the deep, the periphery or the flanks, maybe the rear. But it's that competition phase that I think we have to do a better job of articulating to the Army why that matters so much.
I don't really fault the conventional Army or commanders at echelon or division, brigade on down. They just their assigned mission is to apply mass maneuver, dominate him in phase 3, right? So they're going to train and resource to do that, because ultimately that's their mission and that's what they know the nation, right? It's our job to do all that phase 0 left of preparation and be those forward sensors and quite frankly provide flexible deterrent options during those phases. But I think we're at a point now where we probably need to baseline across the Army and SOF of what each other do, right? And how we complement and supplement each other throughout each phase. And that's just something that's maybe new to us coming out of the GWOP, where everything was go dominate, right? Yeah. and now we need to know what each other does and how we fit into each other by phase.
Well, I think this is an interesting. We're at an interesting conversation. I mean, you guys are bringing it up here, so it's worth it to explore, for another minute, because so you have the culmination of the global war on terror. Now, what I would argue, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that the global war on terror is not over. We've simply, you no longer get the campaign ribbon for it, and it's just it closed some box, on a spreadsheet somewhere. But the reality is that there's still bad people out there who intend to do us harm.
First off, it's steady state.
Exactly. Yeah, we're still going to work. But at the same time, what we saw was a soft force who spent a tremendous amount of time, in some groups more than others, in the kinetic fight, in the CT fight, which has, by and large, created a perception, whether it be in Congress, in the public, or wherever it may be, that SOF is designed for kinetic operations only. Now, if we go back and before we started talking, we talked about the Jedburghs. Here's an organization, the OSS, the Jedburghs, the lineage of our organization, and throughout, even as the organization stood up, you talked about being left of bang, right? Left of day zero. And our organization was created because senior leadership identified that you can't pit conventional force of nation state superpower against superpower nation state. And the only way you win that fight without mutually assured destruction, just like we went through in the 80s and in the early 90s and everything with Russia, is to employ soft forces who then, through proxies and surrogates, are essentially fighting each other. But SOF is successful when we never allow the peer-to-peer fight to actually happen. Okay, now I've laid all that out, and now we sit here, and the Army comes forward and says, okay, SOF, cut 7,000 people. When my opinion, you can tell me if I'm wrong, would be, let's add 7,000 people, because this is precisely the moment in which we need to be doubling down on our SOF efforts, because we're left of the event. I don't know if there's a question in there, but that's just my opinion.
You're entitled to your opinion. I'll give you a little bit of perspective from where we sit. The Army is getting smaller, right? There's force structure reductions across the Army. So let's put that aside here and get after what you're really talking about, which is strategic disruption, is the way I would describe it. The ability to prevent conflict before it happens or shift the enemy's calculus to the right. Right. And so we often talk about the very public knowledge now that President Xi Jinping of China has said that the PLA needs to be ready to militarily invade Taiwan by 2027. That's out there in open source, and that's well known. So we understand that that's a potentiality. 2027 is right around the corner. If we strategically disrupt our adversaries effectively, that date shifts to 2028, to 2029, to 2030. So we potentially never have to fight that we don't want to fight, but we'll be ready to fight if we have to. That's fundamentally where I think campaigning, competition, strategic competition to disrupt, dissuade, deter our adversaries is absolutely critical. And there's a range of tools available to the U.S. government in the Department of Defense, one of which is Special Operations Forces. Forward, engage with partners on a persistent basis, seeing, sensing, understanding the environment, bringing that back, and even preparing the environment for potential crisis. And, unfortunately, crisis happens. We've all been involved in crisis response. And usually we tend to be the first ones to respond because we're already there. And if we're not there directly responding, we're there to enable the joint force to come in and respond to that crisis. And we've seen that time and time and time again. But it's just this concept of strategic disruption, I think, is really important to us. And as we talk about our modernization strategy and our continuous transformation, our doctrine has to reflect that. Our training and our education has to reflect how the RSOF soldier of the future will be very comfortable in that ambiguous environment and probably more persistently forward. I would even argue maybe even forward stationed more frequently and in more locations than we are today. That's what 2030 looks like for us.
What doesn't change in SWCS 2030? What stays the same?
Yeah, so I think first let's ask, why SWCS 2030 in this modernization transformation effort, right? So that's the first question I think most of us ask is why are we even doing it other than just Is it because everybody at every echelon is modernizing and transforming, and therefore SWCS does, or did we really think there's a need to modernize and transform it? And we do. So that modernization transformation effort, really, for us, the end result is a better product to First Special Forces Command and USAJFKSWCS to go exercise those missions on behalf of the nation. And if I say, like, what is the one thing I think where we gain the most value of SWCS 2030 is we've taken a commander, a commandant, a proponent, and a training unit, and we put them under one umbrella so that they can basically have flexibility and speed to iterate quicker on training, leader development, doctrine, and modernization within those three branches for those specific missions, right?
You're closing the feedback loop.
You are. And so I think what we gain is speed and flexibility by, if you think of a pie chart with three slices, you have a commander, a commandant/proponent function, and a training unit that are all under the control of one commander. They can iterate faster and ultimately produce a better end product. Because for us, the real reason we want to modernize and transform is to produce a better end result, i.e. a student or a capability for USAJFKS and the nation, right? In some ways, that baseline ingredient of people, of a fourth generation RSOF soldier, not much of that changes. You got to Camp McCall, things have not changed, and they're probably not going to change anytime soon, because the main ingredient or the foundation of that recipe is get the right people first. Then I'd say left of that model, there's some modernization transformation that might change when it comes to the pipeline or MOS production. And especially with the advanced skills, there's definitely some layering of capabilities and things that change. But ultimately, not much changes in the training as we know it. But what does change is our ability to iterate faster and ultimately get things in the operational force back into the pipeline, so that we're not training legacy tasks that maybe are not relevant in 2030 and beyond.
So one thing Lee and I have said consistently as we look at this continuous transformation is the one place where we will not assume risk and cannot assume risk is in the production of world-class Special Forces, Civil Affairs, and Psyops soldiers. And so if that starts, that's kind of our measuring stick. If we sense there's risk there, then we'll reassess. Right now, 2 years into the process, I think we're still continuing to produce world-class capability, and we're able to transform and modernize it.
Yeah, and I think to the cuts versus growth kind of comment, like, if you look at the cuts, like, nobody wants to take cuts, and, like, quite frankly, hey, you're going to take a 10% cut. I've never wanted 10% less firepower on an OEA and combat, right? So we all want to stay where we're at, but the reality is we could probably streamline and gain some efficiencies across the whole Army, of which, maybe SOF fits into that. Would I love to grow 7,000? That'd be awesome too, right? But I don't know if we could actually, like, do that in a qualitative model as opposed to a quantitative, right? So I think there's a certain threshold where SWCS can optimize and produce quality RSOF soldiers, and I don't know if we could even grow to those levels, right? So there's a little bit of, like, this is what our production model looks like, where we know when we slap that brand and seal of approval on the other side of anything we produce here, that production model needs to fit that. And then, quite frankly, the operational force needs to structure around that, because we can't mass produce SOF, right? It's a soft truth.
Yeah, one of the soft truths.
Yeah. That's one of the things I would, tell your audience out there is, if you want to be challenged, you want a very unique mission, you want to be relevant before conflict even occurs, you like working with indigenous partners, SOF may be the place for you, right? Put on a rucksack and come and check out Camp McCall. We got a great program out there.
Vacation spot.
And it's a great opportunity and if nothing else, it's a great opportunity just to walk away more self-aware. And especially in the Army now, as the Army moves towards career-long assessments and finding opportunities for leaders to seek those challenges over the course of their career to be assessed, we've got a great program for that. Whether you get selected or not, you're going to walk away a better soldier.
You both talked about improving professionalism, about ensuring standards, because when you talk about continue to develop the high quality and top-notch operator, we're talking about standards, upholding the standard, never compromising on the standard. When I think about elite organizations, and in the work I do with companies, we talk about this a lot. Not only do we have to enhance the standard, but elite mindset is never satisfied. Okay, and they still come in and they'll win a game, and I work with athletes, and the best ones will come in and they'll say, I sucked, and it's like, well, you won by 20. Like, yeah, but I did all. You think about Tom Brady, you think about Peyton Manning, these people who are never done. As I read through what's been put forth on SWCS 2030, that theme resonates there, that there's a need to professionalize. And I think about my 13 years and how we always talked about, well, we got to do this better. We got to do this better. Yet at the same time, in the back of our minds, we know we're the best in the world at this. And we do produce the highest quality special operator in the world, capable of any mission. How do you ensure that we're constantly at the tip of the spear when it comes to planning our training, identifying scenario-based opportunities to continue to stay relevant in today's fight, and we don't get complacent?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple thoughts on staying relevant, and then I think Sergeant Major can give you a really good perspective on the quality of our training. But a couple of things that are important to me as a commander. Number one is you have to get assessment and selection right up front, right? That's where we weight our attrition. We don't like to put people in a training that can't be trained. So that's a very important gateway to make sure that program is as rigorous as possible and assesses and then selects the best individuals to be trained. And the truth is, right now and historically, that selection rate is right about 30%, right? And so that's just the reality of the equation. And I think we do that really well. Secondly, in terms of relevancy, continuous dialogue and link with the operational force to understand their requirements, because the environment is changing so quickly. Technology is modernizing so quickly that we have to make sure our program is continuously reevaluated and stays very relevant to the operational force. And I tell you right now, I think we're there, but we can't be satisfied with it. That is a continuous process of dialogue, senior leader dialogue, and then even at the cadre level, dialogue with the operational force to make sure that what we're producing remains relevant. And then the third thing to me is professional military education. One of our roles and responsibilities is leader development. We have an NCO Academy. We have a Warrant Officer Institute. You run a Captain's Career Course. We run the RSOF, the Army Special Operations Pre-Command Course for all Army Special Operations 05 command teams and 06 command teams. They come through our institutions to continue their professional military education. That professional military education has to maintain very, very high standards and reinforce those things that we build at the foundation level in our qualification courses. Any thoughts?
Yeah, just thinking of professionals and wanting to get better. I think like you see in our soft, probably very similar to the athletes you work with, is this kind of culture of excellence, right? Or just always striving to be better. So I think we see a bunch of just professionals that are have humility, but also are lifelong learners, and they're constantly trying to get better. So we do a good job of just trying to model behaviors, right? So when that 18 X-ray gets off the bus, that first sergeant, first class, or master sergeant he meets is the model of what he's trying to be, right? And then over that course of their time here at SWCS through the pipeline, they see that through our cadre of, okay, these are individuals, whether it's a cadre all the way up to General Beaurpere myself, if you're going to do a career in SOF, these are the behaviors you need to model to constantly make yourself better, right? And you see that after training iterations and ARs, we're often very hypercritical of ourselves. Even if everything was great, we want to make it better. And the kind of the concept of marginal gains, where what is the 1 or 2% we can do to improve to ultimately make this better, myself better, the team better. And you see that collectively at every level, both to individuals across teams and within the organization. And that's just part of our culture. It's in our DNA. It's who we are. And then we throw human performance and wellness resources on top of that, right? You see individuals that we all got these Aura sleep rank trackers. If you go around the institution from students to cadre, people are now challenging themselves and each other to get better quality sleep, not because they want to hit a certain metric, because they know that better sleep along with better diet and physical metrics makes me perform better, both at my job, but also as a person. And you see that collectively across the board. It's just an awesome environment to be a part of. And now we have awareness of it. We get that visibility. You naturally seek out those things, those resources to improve, right? But ultimately modeling behavior through our cadre sets those examples and conditions for the students throughout their experience here. And then they go on the operational force, and they get the same thing from their team leaders, team sergeants up to their battalion and group command. And it's a good position to be in across the regiment.
So you brought up sleep, a little bit of technology. I'm gonna go. I have to give a shout out to our friend and Major Allison Brager, who's been on a number of times and joined me up at the Center for Sports Performance and Research up in Boston and served as my co-host. So thank you for lending her to me as you have.
She's great.
But you brought up the technology aspect, okay? And I find it fascinating that when we think about the modernization of warfare, and we think about the peer-to-peer fight. I mean, we see capabilities. One of the things that really has come to my mind over the last several months, especially as the situation has unfolded in Gaza and in the Middle East, what I often think about is that the Navy, the Air Force, they man the arms, meaning that they provide people to man weapon systems. Well, the Army arms the man or woman, the person. And at the center of the Army is one of our core values that people are more important than hardware. But as we evolve, as we modernize, technology becomes more critical to becomes critical. You're shaking your head, but I'm going to go somewhere with this. Okay, technology becomes critical, and we leverage it. And in certain aspects, there are certain things where we're not going to go backwards in terms of how we've been enabled by technology. But at the end of the day, the job that you have in this institution is to develop leaders who are capable of solving complex problems when they're under stress. And I think about the VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. We can have a lot of great leaders when everything's perfect and the sun's out and it's not raining and we're making money and everything's great. But that's not the reality of why we build leaders in SOF, because we're building them for those difficult times. How are you balancing introducing technology to the force, because it is critical in the peer-to-peer fight, but at the same time, we have to develop men and women of strong character who are willing and able to do hard things with or without technology, because technology has been made to make our lives easier, not harder.
There is no question in my mind that the 21st century battlefield will be saturated with technology. And so I think by focusing on the human and getting the best possible human, that human will better adapt to that technology. Right? Just fundamentally, in terms of answering your question, I think you pick the right people with the right attributes who can be trained and who can adapt to almost any environment. You could teach them the technology because they're the right people. There is one aspect, though, that I think is really critical right now, and that's robotics. As you look at the Army's continuous transformation, that there is a desire to better understand where robotics fit on the battlefield. And I think we see the evolution of potentially a new career field in SOF that is focused on robotics. It's still kind of fledgling and under development. But our boss has challenged us to take a look at what it would take to establish a new military occupational specialty inside of special operations that is a robotics and autonomous system integrator and innovator, and what that would look like.
So really a change to the MTO.
Potentially a change to the MTO, right? Continuous transformation. We're constantly exercising, testing, and evaluating new ideas. But I think we see robotics at echelon. We see robotics required at the tactical edge where our teams are operating. To both enable a partner, but also to achieve effects, not just reconnaissance, but lethality as well. We see robotics at echelon to keep pace with the technology and at the pace at which evolution and things are changing in this space to stay relevant and field that very quickly. Now that's going to take some resources. It's going to take some authorities by the Department of Defense to keep pace with that technological change. But we think it's absolutely critical. But again, back to your point, I think my partner here would agree. It's the human at the end of the day. If you pick the right human, you can bring those skills to bear on that right human to use it in what, in our case, for our career field, is in very politically sensitive, often denied environments. That adds a layer of stress and complexity. So I went to robotics there, but really it's the question of humans versus technology. Mm-hmm. That I lead up.
Again, going back to the recipe Van asked, is selecting the right person. So many people with high character with values that align with our SOF attributes. They're physically fit, mentally and emotionally intelligent. They can perform cognitive tasks in stressful environments, and be adaptable, right? And that's what A&S does. And then we train them. And then when you talk about layering technology, right? So just like anything else, not sound old school traditional, You got to have a solid foundation of basic fundamentals, and then we grow from there. So we can never really sway too far in our pipeline or any of our courses of preparing people for the worst day in combat. Combat is a human endeavor, and we need to prepare them for the reality of the worst day in their life at ground combat. Though we do have to layer technology. So I think of like range 37 Sephardic, for example. We have all sorts of optics and red dots that enhance the shooter. But maybe we start with iron sights before we layer on optics, and then we grow from there. And the same with robotic training also. The use of GPS and things like that. So at 8 our Advanced Tactics Infiltration course, it's very easy to push a bundle at night under nods on a GPS-guided bundle with a IR chem light cracked and follow that bundle to the ground with an ATAC system. What do we do in a GPS-denied environment now? ATAC is jumping, map and compass, chasing bundles, right? But they need to be able to work that map and compass before they can flip down that advanced system. So there's this layering of basic fundamentals and adding tech. What we generally find is people that are physically fit, mentally, emotionally intelligent, that perform cognitive tasks under load, when you layer technology on it, they actually use technology better than the folks that maybe didn't get that same baseline fundamental. So going back to what we've heard our whole careers, master the basics. The basics get harder as you go.
Yeah. When I talk to organizations and companies, I'll tell them that there's nothing special about being special forces. You just do the basics and fundamentals better than everybody else, and you never compromise the standard.
Oh yeah.
And if you can wake up every day and that's your default attitude, all the cool guy gear only makes you better.
Right.
But you never become reliant on it because it's your foundational habits that create that.
It's the epitome of a professional soldier, right? That's what every Green Beret wants to do. So I agree.
What are you most excited about looking forward? You've both been around a while, but I know I've heard through the grapevine are going off to do some great things in other places one day. But
I'm not excited about leaving this great job. This is the best job in years.
But what as you look forward, and you look at the regiment and the direction that it's going, what excites you?
The next generation, right? See, if you have a bad day in the Special Warfare Center in school, and you're coming out of a meeting and you're like, man, the budget's not where it needs to be, or we're never going to make this deadline. I just go find a student somewhere, right? And I just pull that student aside and say, hey, tell me your story. Tell me a little bit about why you're here.
So when they stop shaking.
It depends where they are in their pipeline, right? Because they're here for about a year or plus. So if they're on the front end, they're like, oh my God, the general's talking. But on the back end, they're pretty comfortable and they're pretty determined. But hands down, it's why they serve. And you see the fire in their belly, the determination in their eyes, this passion for being the best that they can be. Some will succeed, some will not. But man, they just motivate, right? And it rekindles in me that sense of purpose. After 30 years in the Army, I'm still wearing the uniform, not for me now. It's for that next generation. And that's where I really just get excited. And that's what our modernization strategy is focused on ultimately, is being the best possible institution for them to make sure that they have all the tools required to succeed. So when their 9/11 occurs, that they are as ready as they can be, and that, we can retire from our career in the military knowing that we've done the best possible work we can to make sure that those soldiers that are graduating this institution, regardless of what school, and we have 100 different courses, plus or minus, that we teach every day, almost 4,000 students on any given day here at SWCS. Every student that walks across the stage in this institution, we owe it to them to be as ready as possible for that next crisis. That's what gets me excited.
Yeah, I mean, not to copy my boss here, but definitely I'm excited for the future when you see these amazing just young men and women that come to this institution. Extremely talented, very intelligent, very physically fit. And, when you talk to them, you see that, man, like, you turn on the news, you say, don't watch more than 15 minutes because it's totally negative and, we're attacking each other and everything's going to fail. But we come to work every day and I don't get a sense of that. I actually work every day just feeling fulfilled because even right now, right now there's, I think it's 90 students left for this current A&S class that are, they're starting their long range movement on the trek just to join this team. And tomorrow at 9, hopefully 90 of them are there getting selected, right? But people still show up to do this 8 times a year just to be part of this team. When you meet them and you hear their stories, it's amazing, right? You get to see the best of people, the best of the Army, and really the Joint Force. And then you see the care and training, leadership and development that the cadre put in them. You realize how awesome they are. And I think we had all these great careers in the GWAT, and we're super proud of them. We pat ourselves on the back. But the reality is, I think this generation is going to face challenges much more difficult than anything we faced. And I think they're gonna do it, and they're gonna do it well, and they're gonna bring that soft narrative and continue that legacy, and bring us probably back closer to our own roots of unconventional warfare, like we started with, right? And I think they're very well prepared for it. So it's super exciting to be around.
You brought up the trek, and I'm thinking about I'm kind of actually jealous,
I'd trade places with
them.
them.
I mean, I really would. And I remember like every minute of that thing. I ran the whole thing.
Oh, make no mistake, next time
I ran the whole thing.
Home and it's raining, and you just got done watching your 16 minutes of the negative news stories. There's probably somebody pushing a Jeep in the woods because it's Tuesday at Camp Call.
Good.
Just to join this team, right? Now, that's every single day around here. And so we just have some amazing people. And they still show up in volume, right? Like people, all the things you hear about the numbers declining, like there's still classes of upwards of 300 that are coming.
Good. That's what we need.
And they want to be here, right? Every one of them wants to be here. And they know statistically not all of them are going to make it, but they're going to try. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean, just encouraging them to try, realizing that when they show up to our program, they volunteered to come here.
Yeah.
And so we owe back to them a quality assessment, letting them know just where they stand. Mm-hmm. We have decades worth of data on thousands of candidates, and we can put them within that pool of candidates and articulate to them exactly where they sit compared to the rest of the Army, and they can take that back and become a better leader for the Army, not just for SOF.
I think something I'm excited about is I think in the next year we will see an increase of select rates without lowering the single standard, because for a long time we put a lot of emphasis on recruiting that we need to, but it was recruiting and bringing volume for selects. And recently we've kind of thought about, we have all this data, let's turn data into useful commander decision-making, right? And then, information into decision. And we kind of realized we probably need to focus on preparation. Preparation is king. So you got to recruit them, but we need to arm them with the most preparation we possibly can so they can be successful. And I think by maybe letting people see behind the curtain a little bit and ultimately preparing them for that AMS, we should see those rates increase. And I think we are going to see that without lowering standard. And you're seeing, we had one class of the in-service prep course where we gained a little land nav training, and that little bit of training and preparation, we saw an effect, right? Now, what else can we do? Can we prepare them better physically, whether through, remotely through apps or online training guides? But preparation is king, and I think if we prepare people, they'll be more successful, and our regiments will get the benefit.
We have a tried and tested preparation model that's out there. The Special Operations Recruiting Battalion can give that to you to make sure you're following that training program before you show up at Camp Call to make sure you're successful. And that's been around for a while. It's evolved over the years, obviously, but it's a very successful program.
And those lessons become ingrained in you too, and they never go away. I mean, a couple of things I take away from being in the regiment, being here at the school, is the tagline of the podcast: "How you prepare today determines success tomorrow." I mean, there's no more true statement. We can't. Hope is not a course of action. And we can't expect to achieve success if we don't put in the work before that. And the other thing that you mentioned, sir, was the ability to have people who come into the regiment who are willing to do whatever it takes to be successful. And even post service, for me, that's continuing. I even wear this bracelet that somebody gave me on my wrist like 2 years ago that says, whatever it takes, to remind me every day. And I thought it was stupid when they first gave it to me. I'm like, I'll never wear that thing. And I was looking at it a couple of days later, and I was like, why not? And it's just got constant reminder of, you got to wake up today and you set out a goal and you're going to achieve that goal.
It's better than getting a tattoo, but
I made it. I made it 13 years in the Army. No tattoos, no nicotine.
Yeah.
So
good. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Test question. Last question. The Jedburghs in World War II. You'll be familiar with this. They had to do 3 things every day. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, and they had to be able to communicate. We talked about habits for a minute. Those are foundational tasks. Those are things that become second nature. They become routine. If you train them enough and they're ingrained in you, you never think about it, which means that, as we talked about earlier, you talked about mental and physical capacity under load. the more times you do something, the less you have to think about it, which means your actual attention and focus can focus on something else. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
What are the 3 things that you each do? I'll give you a chance to each answer this. What are the 3 things that you each do every day in your personal or professional lives that set the conditions for your success? It can be anything. It can be anything. Generally every day.
I'll start. I'm sure Lee's got Lee's phenomenal thoughts on this, but I think there's so 3 things that I think generally make a leader in the Army and a leader in RSOF successful. Number 1, I think you have to read professional. You have to have a professional reading program, but something that is diverse enough to challenge you intellectually. But the study of the profession of arms, I think, is absolutely critical. And so, whether I'm successful every day or not, I always try to read something, whether it's an audiobook or actually pick up something and read, whether it's an article, a professional journal. I think that's critical. So I think you have to have a reading program. Number 2, I think you got to take care of yourself physically, right? Especially at least at my age. Lee's not far behind me, but I think you have to, and that there's a couple things in the human performance program really coaches us over the years to watch this. But we talked about sleep. You have to make sure you get a good night's sleep. You got to have good nutrition, and you got to be physically active. Because I fundamentally believe that to have a sound mind, you have to have a sound body. Right now, I think the 2 are symbiotic, and so you have to have an ability to just take care of yourself physically. And then 3rd, I think you have to have a strong foundational value system that ties you back to your family and the character and who you are as a human being, not just as a leader, but just as a human. Right? I'm married very happily to a former Army nurse. She got out of the Army because she wanted me to be successful in my career, and I've never forgotten that. And I always elevate her as the example of true sacrifice. She never volunteered to follow me necessarily, but she was willing to, because we had a strong foundation built in our relationship and God, and that we have 4 wonderful kids who all grew up as Army brats, and they range in age from 25 to 11 years old, and 2 of them are in the Army right now. Right? Never would have thought, but they're serving. I'm so darn proud of them, regardless of what they all decide to do. But again, they didn't get a vote. They wanted, and agreed to follow me in my career, and that presented them some challenges. But I think we got through it as a family because we had a strong foundation in the family and our core values. So you have to have that foundation. That's so critical, and you got to work on that too, right? I think you gotta maintain that, otherwise you're gonna lose it.
Yeah, so mine are very similar to Beaurpere's, and they're probably somewhat intangible, but I'll go through them anyway. So the first was I structure my day around my values. I think if I structure my day around my core values as a person, I can go through my day and basically question my decisions or my day or decisions against that, right? And am I staying true to myself? And if so, that'll guide me along both my personal life with my work life. And I think that keeps you humble and consistent as you move from job to job or stressful situations. And what I find is when the stress piles up or the chips are down is when your values, you really have to align yourself to them, and that's when they shine through the most. So I live my life day by day through my values, as intangible, weird as that sounds. The second one, I'm maybe like going back to preparation's king. I'm a firm believer that you're only as hard as the last hard thing you did. So constantly challenging yourself or setting goals, right? Whether it's a physical goal or being a lifelong learner, but by doing so, it forces me to kind of like think about all components of my wellness: physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, financial health, right? But setting goals and putting myself in uncomfortable situations. And then once you're done with that, looking back to, hey, what was the last hard thing I did or last goal I set? Because I'm only as good as that, plus the atrophy, right? And then, the third thing is a gratitude or a purpose, coming home to my family every day and giving me a reason that you do this in the first place. When I pull in the driveway, I'm leaving work behind me and I'm walking through the door to be with my wife and kids, which is the reason we're all doing this anyway, right?
Awesome. Read professionally, physically take care of yourself, have a strong value system. Structure your day around values. Constantly challenge yourself. I tell people all the time, nobody cares what you did yesterday.
Yes.
It matters what you do today to be successful, and have gratitude. Those are all great ones and really important. I'll tell you both that, coming through this organization breeds within you a entire psychology of winning, no matter the challenge. And you asked me, sir, at the beginning before we started, why I called this the Jedburgh podcast, and I told you the story about identifying these values, identifying the character, the work ethic, what it takes to define what true leadership is, whether that be here in service, whether that be in the private sector, whether you're an athlete, a business person, it doesn't matter. Because if you are a person of character, if you wake up every day and you put people above everything else, and you relentlessly execute to the best of your ability, and you don't necessarily care about what's going to happen on the back end and how great things might be for you, but you do the right thing every single day because it's the right thing to do, just like you do, and those students will do tonight when they start running through the woods for unknown distance, unknown time, until someone tells them to stop. I think about that all the time. Sundown. Stay in between the cones, don't deviate from the cones, do your best. And I run all night. And I think if you live your life that way, and you take the lessons that are taught here, and you apply them to everything you do, you will be successful. And I share your optimism for the next generation of what I'll call warrior to go out there, because the challenges are vast and the challenges are great, and we will see challenges that we may and do not expect. We will be relying on them to carry this nation forward. And I believe that we've set the conditions, and you've carried that forward and built a great organization with a great vision that will continue to put this nation first. And I thank you so much for sitting down with me, everything you're doing. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Fran. It's been an honor.
Yeah. Thank you.
And appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast, an official program of the Green Beret Foundation. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other long and short form content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow the Jedburgh Podcast and the Green Beret Foundation on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, or Threads. Send your comments and inquiries to fran@jedburghpodcast.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Media Channel and the Green Beret Foundation remain committed to supporting all generations of U.S. Army Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.